Greetings! Welcome to Devlog for hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. We're going to be doing a extra special devlog this week, actually in the Unity editor, because this past week I've made like explosive progress with more advanced SOSIG functionality. So it's going to be what our focus is this week, and it's because things are still pretty torn apart. I'm going to be showing it to you folks in sort of third-person perspective, so that I can control it easier. So let's go ahead and jump right in to our Unity editor here. You can see this is like a torn apart modified version of our proving ground scene, where I've turned off a whole bunch of the cover and pulled out some stairs to create intentionally disconnected areas. And that's sort of like the theme of this week's work in general, is making it so that SOSIGs can handle more complex level topologies, and by being able to handle those things, open up new possibilities for like interesting and dynamic tactical gameplay with them. So what I'm going to do momentarily, because it's going to depend on everything, is I'm going to just give you a very quick explanation of the way that SOSIGs move around environments in H3, how they've sort of done that for the length of the game, some of the limitations of that, and then what we have changed. So agents in H3, and like in many games, navigate via what's called a Nav Mesh. It's like a simplified version of the scene. You can see it, in fact, if I go into wireframe, you can see it easier here. So this is the Nav Mesh for this portion of the proving ground. This is like the geometry surface that Nav Mesh agents can move around. And there's something called height mesh, which I can turn on, which is just a more precise elevation. But basically, this is the scene as it is seen by the system that basically gets asked, "You're here, go to here," and it figures out a path to that area. And that's the only thing it knows about the scene, and it can move across this geometry, and it can use something called off-mesh links for certain circumstances, like if it needs to go from somewhere high and somewhere low that doesn't have a sort of direct connection there, it uses one of those. Now, these have worked not so great in H3. Anyone who has watched a SOSIG go up and down a ladder in Taken Hold knows that they're kinda janky. They've never really worked super well. They go up at sort of unpredictable speeds. It feels weird. And the reason for that is that Unity, the engine that H3 is in, sort of has two ways that an off-mesh link, one of these little connections here between an area, can work. There's the automatic way, which it sort of moves across it almost as though it was flat ground at a regular speed, and sort of automatically latches to it and automatically completes it. Or you have to do everything yourself. There's no in between. You either get fully automatic behavior or completely manually executed behavior. And the couple times in the past with the game's development where I have attempted to do manual off-mesh links, I have run into some sort of brick wall. Either I didn't understand it, or it was a bug, or something like that. And so I've always just reverted back to automatic and sort of shrugged at the fact that when they go up and down ladders, they knock themselves out 1 in 5 times. So, but this, I sort of backed myself into a corner, because I gave you folks doors. Everyone's enjoying doors. Now the agents need to go through the doors, and well, that gets complicated, which we'll get to in a minute. So basically, I'm going to show you the sort of order that new things have been added here. So if I hit play, the first place that I needed to start to making this happen was to finally sort of rectify a long-term sort of problem with the SOSIG's navigation, which is that anywhere in H3 where you have seen SOSIGs patrolling from a place to place, like not just wandering from one random place to another, but sort of going from A to B to C to D and then back again, that hasn't been a sequence of actions that the SOSIG actually like thinks about. It's more like there's been an external system that has kept track of those points and basically gone, have they gotten there yet? Okay, they've gotten there, give them a new point. Have they gotten there yet? Give them a new point. And while that sounds like it's basically the same thing, it's not quite, in part because the SOSIGs are never sort of internally aware that there's a sequence of actions that they need to possibly perform, like going from A to B to C. And so the transitions in and out of combat state are kind of sub-ideal for that, and it isn't an architecture that can support doing something like, go over there, open a door, stop for a second while you're opening it, open the door, continue through the door, continue on with where you're going. And so I had to build that first, finally. And so the first example we have here, as I spawn a SOSIG, is that there's now a sort of an internal SOSIG order called move to, or path to, I believe. And path to can be sort of fed in a series of path to points and a whole bunch of properties about it. It can be fed in sort of like, what is the maximum speed for this pathing behavior? What's their sort of positional tolerance to those points? Do they sort of do it once, ping pong, loop ping pong, a fixed number of times, loop endlessly, ping pong endlessly, pick random points and go to them, random endlessly, etc., and then a bunch of sort of look behavior, and whether this is a patrol. So I can now issue a more nuanced order of like, they're just walking from place to place, or they're walking from place to place actively, like they're in a guard state while they're doing it, and sort of have elevated perceptual characteristics. So this was the first thing that I built and sort of tested all of these different modes and made sure that the SOSIG can sort of come into and out of this state elegantly. Like basically if I set this to not, instead of ping-ponging endlessly, but just to do it once, it'll sort of go to its point, come back from its point, and then go back to whatever its fallback order is, which could be guarding, could be an entirely other patrol, something along those lines. So this was the framework that a whole bunch of the work afterward has been built on. So let's turn that one off. Turn that off. So then the next thing is, once I actually got a sort of path to behavior, I created a new typology that our off-mesh links can use. So you can see here how this has an off-mesh link going from place to place. And when I actually click on the link, if it lets me do so, cool, we have I've created something called a Nav Mesh link extension, which allows me to associate a bunch of priorities to it based on what type of link it is. So in the case, this is a ladder, and this ladder has speeds for sort of mounting and unmounting the ladder, going up it and going down it, as well as, well, you'll see here, let me turn that actually up to 4 there, some things involving wobble. So if I hit play here, spawn a SOSIG, and move to. Now our SOSIG moves to here, wobbles its way up the ladder at a specific speed, goes to a point, comes back, and then slides down. And you'll notice that as it does that slide down the ladder, it starts very slow and then picks up speed over time. So basically, if it's sliding down a taller ladder, it'll be going faster by the time it's at the bottom of it. But it's not as fast as if it were, say, falling. Like, there's still some resistance there, but you pick up a little bit of momentum if you're sliding down one. So I'm super happy with this. And note that because of the fact that the SOSIG is still just moving here, it can still continue to do the other sorts of things that it does. It can still look around and see threats. It can still shoot while it's doing this. It's just going to have its movement a little more constrained, and it shouldn't sort of ping pong on the ladder nearly as much as it used to, because of the way these sorts of pathing behaviors work and because of what's called the sort of cost effect of traversing in this way. So yeah, here's our little ladder climbing SOSIG. So proud of him. Wonderful. On to the next one. So the next one we have here is is sort of handling transitions of this is actually sort of 2-in-1 in this path. I've created a type for jumping where they go from a sort of start point to an end point and have an arc to it. They move through the air a little slower than someone actually would in real life. Like if you actually jumped at that speed, you would not clear the landing. This is very much a call it a cartoon jump from place to place. But I'm doing that in part because, one, it looks cool, and two, it provides more of an opportunity in the air for you to hit them and for them to go ballistic and just flub their landing and slam into something, which I think is just going to be really fun. And then the second sort of transition that is available on this path is a drop, which is distinct in that the Sosig sort of goes off the surface and then drops and sort of picks up speed as it's coming down. Boop. Jumping up there. Let's follow the Sosig along. Wonderful. And what's great is that like that little motion there when they're at the end is actually just pure inertia. It's part of one of the many joys of having an agent whose behavior is so physics driven, is that you just sort of you get that for free. Oh. I think I set this to ping pong. Up there and whoop. Perfect. So yeah. So there is our Sosig jumping behavior. Super happy with it. Seems to be mostly stable. This next one is a little less visually exciting, but is important that it is sort of like in the repertoire of things that the Sosigs can do, simply because there was no sort of code version of this, which is to be able to have something akin to a teleporter in the system. And what makes this special from a pathfinding standpoint is that all off-mesh links can have their cost altered, meaning that by default, if the off-mesh link goes from a point to another point, the pathfinding system treats it as though the agent has walked linearly that distance. So imagine it's like 7 meters. So if you created a teleport point to point that was like 300 meters long, unless that was the only route they could get from this point to this point, they likely wouldn't take that route. But you can alter that sort of cost via multiplier. So you can be like, no, that costs 2. And so the agent thinks of it as being only a 2-meter traversal and so wants to take that teleport point. So it allows you to do some interesting things, granted, if you're in more of like sort of a sci-fi context with them. So, but it's one of the reasons I had thought a while back of putting sort of like teleporters in the Meat Fortress scene, but I didn't have a way to do that, and now I do. So, initiate move. Boop. And so you'll see, right now there's no visual effect or anything like that. It just waits at the point for about a second and then traverses to the new point. All of its equipment comes with it and doesn't physics glitch, which was actually the hard part of doing this. When you've got a complex physics assemblage, just telling it, you're all now over here, can result in some odd behaviors. So, but that's all working now. So there is our teleport and Sosig. And of course, the part that you, I'm sure, have been waiting for, which is why I have saved it for last, is our door. We've got, let's see here. Let's see. I think I'm going to, I'll do this with a. We'll do it with a breacher. That seems appropriate to begin with. So, any of you who have been following along with this process on Twitter know that this has actually taken a majority of the week's time. Everything else that you saw, I basically got done in a day. And then everything related to this blasted door has taken the rest of my time, including like over a full production day of hunting this incredibly obscure bug in the Unity pathfinding system that I didn't understand until last night, and then I almost cried when I finally figured it out because it had been stressing me out. So let's Let's see our SOSIG door breaching. So what's really cool about the way that the sort of like the door off mesh link is more complex than the other ones. If I select it and turn on its sort of reference points, you can see that basically what this has is it has an outside point and inside point, which has a little more clearance for obvious reasons, and then sort of these two extra references that is sort of like where the SOSIG should stand when it's operating the door from the outside or the inside, for just clearance and things like that. And those are used conditionally based upon what the state of the door is. So if we blast it, where is it? Ah, there we go. So we're going to have this door is locked and shut, which means that we're going to end up having it's going to breach the door by shooting out the deadbolt. So initiate move 2. It comes up to the door, and then blam. Slams out the deadbolt, walks through, and then shuts the door. He says, I'm done with you. Opens the door and shuts it behind it. Now, this behavior of whether or not it shuts the door is state dependent. If the SOSIG is just moving from point to point and it isn't in an elevated sort of skirmishing state or something like that, it takes the time to do this. If it's in the middle of shooting something, it does not. It just tries to blast the door open and continue on where it goes. It doesn't really care about some other things. And this is all set up to sort of be this sort of hierarchy of behavior in regards to the locked door state. Eventually, when it's completely finished, because I don't have the sort of SOSIG having a key thing working quite yet, what it will basically do is first go, am I inside the door? Well, then just unlock it. Am I outside the door? Do I have a key? No, I don't. Well, do I have a gun? Okay, use the gun. Oh, do I not have a gun? Do I have a melee weapon? If so, smash the door open. I still haven't figured out exactly what I want to do. If the door is locked and they don't have any other means of opening it, maybe they'll just slam themselves against the door repeatedly. That might be funny. That might be exactly the right thing to do as I'm just saying it now. So, but yeah, so let's, we can try that with a different SOSIG type. So if we just do, what is it? A guard should just have a pistol. I have spent so much time now watching these things breach this door, which was funny when, and by funny I mean terrifying, when in like 1 in 20 times it would just terminally fail to do so for reasons I did not understand. There you go. Bam. And that's so neat. And what's really cool is that the behavior the SOSIG is using to do this is a new type of behavior that's called sort of like static shoot at. It's a behavior that exists inside of the SOSIG that can only be piloted by some other external thing, whether that's another system within the SOSIG or something out in the game. So in this case, the behavior that causes the SOSIG to traverse the door is piloting the state of shoot at a specific thing, where it's shooting at the deadbolt. But I can use this state in the future for doing some other sort of cinematic things. I really have wanted for the longest time to make it so that there was an indoor range in H3 that you could go to as a scene, and there were just other SOSIGs hanging out at that range, like coming and going. There's a one at the front counter of the store who's just like telling stories no one is listening to, and just as you're there shooting in the indoor range, SOSIGs come in, they pick a booth, they reset their target, they take some shots at a target, and then they leave, sort of thing, just to create that ambiance. With this, I'll actually be able to do that sort of like cinematic trickery with their behavior. So, oh, did he get... Oh, huh. He got stuck. So the door is open. It looks like it's getting physics force, but not enough of it to open it. So I might have to noise. Yep, there we go. Yep. So that what just happened there is it seems that the internal system that applies a continuous physics force to open the door wasn't applying enough physics force to like override the friction on the joints or something like that. So I think I'll probably have to add a little tester that if it spends a certain amount of time in that state, it sort of ups the amount of physics force it uses up to some limit. Yeah, it did it again. It's opened and shut enough. I wonder if this is just like drift in the joint. I'm glad to see this. Yeah, now it's gonna get even worse because I've moved it in editor. Huh. Glad to find a new bug. Wouldn't be a devlog without a bug. So, and then beyond this, we have as I mentioned before, they can sort of use a gun, or they can use a melee weapon to do it. So, which at the moment isn't terribly cinematic. I'm still trying to decide whether I want to have them take like one more set of swipes at the door after they break it open, after they sort of crack it. But right now, this is the behavior. Where they come up to the door. They crack it, and then they just pop open like that. I would like to make it so that they at least try to like chop. Oh. You gotta admit, that's pretty great, though. In like a ridiculous way. I actually want to see if it just keeps falling apart more each time. Oh, no. Made it out. So, yeah. So, I'm probably going to try to do some sort of detection where I, like, recognize... Oh, just breaking a piece off. Where the SOSIG can kind of recognize that the door has been cracked, but it's still sort of standing there, and still make it take, like, one or two more whacks just to get another piece or two to fall off. But, yeah. So, you have no idea how much work it has been to get this all to work. But I'm super pleased with it. Let's watch him do it one more time. So, but this is exciting though, because this is, folks have been asking like, when are we going to get that like update to the grill house scene where I can spawn groups of SOSIGs with just a button press and things like that. And I want to put that in, but in the current state of the way it has worked because of the doors, just the SOSIGs are just completely busted in large parts of that scene because they've had no way to perceive and interface with the doors. And now they have that. And so I can now spend the next week sort of going through the game and setting up all of the necessary changes to off-mesh links and getting this into the rest of the door systems. Yeah, there we go. Oh, you lost his weapon? Yup. Careless. At least the door has been taken care of. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I think that just about does it. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation on advancing SOSIG AI and capabilities. I am super excited to get this, folks, get this into your hands. I had wanted to do that in a first experimental build this week, but the game is a wreck right now. I had to completely... The things I had to do to make these off-mesh links work means that I have temporarily broken, like... Taken Hold, and the Meat Fortress scene, and basically anywhere where I placed an off-mesh link is now broken until I update it to this new system. So this next week, I actually kind of have to run around the whole game and do a whole bunch of sort of like content massage to get all of those things working again and get this plugged into the new grill house scene so y'all can start testing this on an experimental branch. So that's my goal, is to have a first experimental ready for next week, as long as nothing else explodes, or as long as I don't end up having to spend another day and a half hunting down a bug in a Unity black box system that is, of course, undocumented. So I'm only slightly irritated at that, as you can tell. So yeah, well, I hope you folks all have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see y'all soon. Peace.